Hello, trading card game multi-fandom. As a fan of trading card games, I have found interest in custom cards and exploring mechanics and similarities between multiple TCGs. On YouTube, I have seen some videos made by various creators that take cards from one TCG and adapt them into playable cards for another TCG. For instance, some YouTubers have converted Yu-Gi-Oh cards into Magic the Gathering cards and vice versa. Other videos have converted Pokemon cards into Magic cards and Yu-Gi-Oh cards into One Piece cards. However, no TCG will ever make these cards legal, but it's still a fun and creative form of art and thought experiments. Since Pokemon is one of the most popular TCGs, there is a lot of art and custom cards on the internet for it. As a player of many TCGs, especially Magic the Gathering and Pokemon, I found it interesting to think about how Magic the Gathering cards would work in the game of Pokemon. So, in this video, I decided to convert several cards of many different criteria. Let's start with the Black Lotus, an iconic card. Black Lotus is an old card from the 90s of Magic the Gathering that saw heavy use in tournaments, and because of its limited amount and the fact that it will never be reprinted outside of the vintage format, it is a rare collector's item. It is used for ramping in Magic the Gathering to gain more resources. The card allows players to discard it to gain 3 mana of any kind. It ended up being banned in almost all competitive formats. Pokemon has a whole category of special energy cards, and so does Magic the Gathering with dual and special lands. Pokemon also has Reversal, Rainbow, and Luminous energies, so a card with similar abilities as the Black Lotus could exist. So I designed this card, Black Lotus, so it will provide 3 energy at any time. However, after a Pokemon it is attached to attacks, it is discarded. However, you don't discard any other cards from that Pokemon. This way, you gain 1 immediate attack while you're trying to build up resources. Many EX Pokemon have attacks that require you to discard energies, so this would be an easy method since it would be discarded anyway. Also, this card prevents you from discarding any other cards attached to that Pokemon, so this card could work pretty well in the Pokemon game, especially in the current meta. Now let's move on to power and toughness. In TCGs, power and HP of cards is dependent on the format and the game, as every game has different statistics on HP numbers. Some games have the main numbers being single digit and some have them being in the thousands. Magic the Gathering came out first and it's in the single digit category. Most creatures are between 1 and 10, but there are exceptions. The highest a single card in the game is 20, although Magic is full of cards and effects that can get higher through counters and other methods. Many games have it being in the thousands, and some are in between. In Pokemon, the numbers are in their tens and range from 30 HP to 380 HP. Non-legendary basic Pokemon are usually under 100, and most powerful cards, legendary Pokemon and Stage 2 Pokemon, are a couple hundred or between 100 and 200. A reasonable translation would be to make 20 Pokemon HP for each digit in Magic the Gathering. But it shouldn't be 100% consistent because some cards should be adjusted for the different game. However, this is a good baseline translation rate. Magic has blockers and some creatures with only basic stats, with no special abilities or effects, and these are sometimes jokingly called vanillas. Pokemon don't have these effects as common, but there are some Pokemon with really simple attacks that are just simple damage takers, and some that prevent Pokemon from attacking. I'm going to start off by translating a simple, well-known vanilla Crawworm. This card has a high mana cost of 6 in Magic the Gathering, so I gave it 2 average attacks and made it an average basic Pokemon with typical weaknesses, and made it a grass type, as is a green creature in Magic the Gathering. In Pokemon, there are no summoning costs, so I distributed the 6 cost as 3 for its most powerful attack and a retreat cost of 3. Since its mana cost could function in a deck with multiple mana types due to having some colors and mana requirements, I made the powerful attack require 1 grass mana and 2 colorless energies. Another thing that Pokemon has in common with Magic the Gathering is some low-level basic creatures with useful abilities for competitive gameplay. Pokemon has Badoo, Pichu, and the recent Shaymin. So, why not turn one of the Magic the Gathering's best into one for Pokemon? Magic has Dark Confidant, a card that allows card draw and can be used in different ways by certain cards and does damage to your own life points by the card you draw's mana cost. So, let's add this to Pokemon. First of all, it has a simple attack, but the ability is all we care about for this kind of card. Due to its mana cost, of 1 black and 1 other mana value, I'll adapt this card into a Pokemon as a Dark-type Pokemon with a retreat cost of 1 and 1 attack that deals 40 damage with an energy cost of 1 Darkness energy. Its ability needed some modification, but it's doable. You draw and reveal a card after drawing for the start of your turn. If it's a Pokemon, you deal 10 damage for each of the energy costs shown on the card, added up to, which is the closest thing to converted mana cost in Pokemon. If it's another card, then you only take 1 or 2 damage counters depending on what the card is. However, since there is no player life point system in Pokemon, a better way to adapt this would be to distribute the damage counters how you like. This would synergize with many different abilities in Pokemon, for instance, En's Zoroark from the recent set Journeys Together, and many other Pokemon have effects that damage defending Pokemon based on the amount of damage counters on your Pokemon. This card would make them more powerful and would be extremely useful in competitive play. Plus, you'd still get to use the cards that you reveal with it. Next, I'm going to convert a legendary creature from Magic the Gathering into an EX Pokemon that would be extremely useful. Tevil, Arbachir of Virtue, a 6/6 flyer that is powerful in Magic the Gathering, and this card is powerful because it has lifelink and gives spells you cast Delve, an ability to exile cards from your graveyard to pay for them. And I'm going to adapt it so it's a 180 HP Pokemon, instead making each digit in Magic the Gathering 30 HP. It will have a retreat cost of 2 and will have 1 attack that does 180 damage and allows you to heal damage on itself for the damage dealt. However, this attack requires 3 energy of different types, dark, grass, and water, since Tevil is a Sultai creature. Lastly, I decided to adapt the Delve mechanic as an ability called Delving Scavenge. Pokemon's equivalent Exile is the Lost Zone, so Tevil moves cards from the discard pile to the Lost Zone to reduce attack costs. But it can be only used once this turn on one Pokemon at a time. Whenever you attack while this Pokemon is on the field, you take damage for every energy in the attack's energy cost as a catch. However, like how Magic Tevil allows life gain for dealing damage, which makes up for damage you lost paying for spells, this Pokemon's life drain ability allows it to recover from high attacks you use. However, the Pokemon wouldn't be too overpowered because the HP is 180, which could be beaten easily by many Pokemon in the current meta. However, its ability would be extremely useful, so I created 2 versions of this card, one regular version and one golden full art version. Next, I'm going to convert some spell cards into trainer cards. There's the Dig Through Time instant. Pokemon has several cards that allow you to look at the top 7 cards of the deck and put 2 of them into your hand. But this instant has Delve, allowing you to exile cards from your graveyard for it. So, I'm going to make this one an Ancient Supporter that requires you to move 2 cards from your discard pile to the Lost Zone. Next, I'm going to create an item card based on one extremely useful instant mana drain. In Magic, there are many cards that you can play on your opponent's turn to counteract their spells. These are called instants. Pokemon doesn't have anything like this. Also, the spell Mana Drain allows you to counteract a spell and gain mana your next turn based on its cost. In Pokemon, this ability is heavily altered. On your turn, you force your opponent to reveal their hand, then you can discard one Pokemon or trainer card from it and search your deck for energy cards based on what the card is. If it's a Pokemon, you search for the energies in one of its attacks. However, chances are you won't have the same type of energies in your deck as theirs, but colorless energies and attacks make this easier as you can search for any card. If you just discard a trainer card, then you can search for any items, and items allow you to search for 1, supporters 2, stadiums 2, and ace specs 3. Sorceries are a little easier to adapt. For instance, the next card I'm going to convert is the sorcery Time Walk. This card allows you to give yourself a second turn after your turn concludes. Since this is obviously powerful, I'm going to make it an ace spec. Another type of Pokemon card that I haven't made yet is a Stadium card. For this, I'm going to use the blue enchantment Rhystic Study. It's an enchantment in Magic the Gathering that is valuable, useful, and old. Enchantments are spells that linger on the field after they have been played in MTG. Pokemon has cards like this called Stadiums, but only one's ability can work at a time, and they affect both players equally. Because of this, most of them have an effect that is specific to a certain type of cards to help and hinder, and are put into decks based on synergy and strategy. Rhystic Study's effect is that whenever a player casts a spell, you draw a card unless the player pays 1 mana. For Pokemon, this is going to be a stadium designed for water decks. Whenever either player plays a trainer or uses an ability, the other player may draw a card, unless the player discards 1 energy from one of their Pokemon or hand. Another type of card that can easily work in Pokemon is equipment cards, since Pokemon have tool cards. I'm going to convert Swiftfoot Boots, a piece of equipment that gives a creature haste and hexproof. Haste counteracts summoning sickness in Magic the Gathering, allowing you to attack the first turn you play it, and hexproof makes a creature immune to abilities and spells. Since summoning sickness doesn't exist in Pokemon, except for the fact that you can't attack on your first turn, I'm going to make Swiftfoot Boots a tool that gives the Pokemon it's attached to no retreat cost instead. I'm going to adapt the hexproof availability so that the Pokemon it's attached to cannot be targeted by effects of attacks, abilities, or trainers used to interact with it, or the cards attached to it. Next, I'm going to try to adapt a Planeswalker card. Magic has cards with multiple effects similar to Pokemon, but they are character cards rather than creatures and are completely separate from creatures and cannot attack. Converting one of these into a supporter would be an interesting move. So, I'm going to convert one. Many Planeswalkers have multiple abilities, so making some of them Pokemon would be necessary. However, this time I'm going to convert Angrath, Captain of Chaos, since it only has one optional effect. Since blocking in Pokemon is totally different from Magic the Gathering, and this card gives Menace in Magic, the Pokemon supporter based on Angrath allows you to bypass effects or special conditions that affect your Pokemon. Since the Planeswalker is designed to add counters to armies, of which tokens don't exist in Pokemon, I gave it a different ability. When you play it, you heal all damage from one of your non-basic Pokemon, and if you don't have any damaged non-basic Pokemon, you search your deck for and reveal one non-basic Pokemon. Out of all mechanics in Pokemon, there is one that doesn't have a direct Magic the Gathering equivalent: evolution. However, Magic the Gathering has some cards that are double-sided that have a mechanic to transform. So, I came up with one to convert into a Stage 1 Pokemon. However, I couldn't find anything like Stage 2. The closest thing is the Meld mechanic, but it's more like Monster Fusion, so I stayed out of that. So I'm converting Hunt Master of Fells and its werewolf form, Ravager of the Fells, into this Stage 1 Pokemon. First of all, I'm making a fighting type instead of a red or green type. Huntmaster of the Fells would have an ability to search your deck for its evolution as long as neither player played a trainer in their last turn. It would also have an ability to draw 2 cards. This isn't too different from its ability to gain 2 life or create a green wolf token. Drawing cards is a decent and reasonably powered ability. Its evolution, Ravager of the Fells, would be 120 HP fighting type. First of all, it would have the ability to immediately deal 40 damage to the defending Pokemon when it evolves, if an attack would be paid for by 2 fighting energies and would deal 120 damage. If the defending Pokemon is KOs, then you take an extra prize card. It would also deal 40 damage to one of their benched Pokemon, but like always, you wouldn't apply weaknesses and resistances. Like some fighting types, it would be vulnerable to psychic Pokemon, which would give it their weakness. Plus, the retreat cost of this Pokemon would be low because it's a werewolf, and werewolves are known for speed. Magic the Gathering is a large and expansive game that has been around for over 30 years, and Pokemon is also an old and fantastic TCG. Converting cards between these two games is very interesting as there are so many differences and so many similarities between these two. To see how far apart and similar these are at the same time, and to convert cards between these two is extremely interesting. If you like this concept, please comment down below if you agree with the ways that I adapted these cards. Please comment down below if there are any magic cards that you would like to see converted, or any 2 TCGs that you would like to see cards converted between. I hope you enjoyed this video.